So, thank you everybody who has joined us tonight for what is the second panel in our panel series for the Vagina Dialogues. The team will agree with me that this has been by far the most popular panel talk. We've had so many sign-ups and I've had so many people asking me about this panel and the content of what we were going to be sharing tonight, which I think goes to show just how much knowledge is lacking and how hungry people within our community are to talk more about female sexual pleasure. So just before we begin, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Olivia and I'm the founder of Luüna. And so for those of you that don't know, we are Asia's social impact period care company led by women. And we have an incredibly specific mission. So through our healthy and planet-friendly period products, through our menstrual health education, and through our social impact business model, we are making periods better for our bodies, for our planet, and for our sisters in need. So for anybody that has bought our products so far, or anybody within our community, you might be aware of some of our achievements so far, which is having reduced plastic period waste by over 3 million pads and tampons in just over 1 year. We have donated over 35,000 pads to vulnerable groups affected by COVID-19 since March of this year. And we have held over 500 period workshops in schools, universities, corporates and communities in the last few years. And if anybody's wondering then why a period care company like us is hosting the Vagina Dialogues and specifically hosting a panel about female sexual health, let me just give you some clarity. So whilst our work very much begins with tackling menstrual stigma, and we are absolutely period obsessed, I think it's safe to say, we have been able to unearth the myriad ways that taboos around women's bodies really continues to hinder the advancement of women and girls across Asia and the world. And so while our work very much starts with promoting more conversation about menstrual health, it really does not end there. And we are really fiercely committed to talking more about the taboos that hinder conversation around our bodies in all areas. And female sexual pleasure plays such an important part of that. Again, having spoken to our community members about this topic, we really do see that people are really starved for conversation and knowledge about this topic. And that is why we have brought our amazing panelists together tonight to draw more attention to this topic. So thank you so much to our panelists, to my team for organizing, and to our audience for joining us tonight. Panelists, please, could you introduce yourselves? We have Jingjin. Could you please start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Olivia, and thank you so much for the great, fantastic Luüna team. And you are doing a fantastic job. We are not period obsessed. We are vagina obsessed as well, pleasure obsessed. So my name is Jingjin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ZaZaZu, the safe space to elevate a woman's intimacy journey with no shame and no blushing. I'm Chinese, and I lived first my 16 years in Beijing, in China, second 16 years in Germany, and now 3 years in Singapore. I actually have a background in industrial engineering and business, and now I am building something fantastic alongside with my co-founder Cassandra, ZaZaZu, the discrete e-commerce ecosystem in Singapore to guide women to explore, experiment, and enhance your sexual journey through education, consultation, and curation of products based on your individual needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Cecile.
Thanks, Olivia, and thanks the Luüna team for organizing this workshop. I'm Cecile. I work at Smile Makers. I've been with Smile Makers for over 4 years now. So Smile Makers is a sexual wellness brand for women. We create vibrators and lubricants that are sold exclusively in health and beauty stores across the world and in Southeast Asia. So in Singapore and in Hong Kong, you can find us at Watson's, Guardian. In Singapore, you can find us at Isetan. And for smile makers, I basically do marketing for the brand, but when you do marketing for a vibrator brand, you end up talking about sex on a daily basis with women all around the world. And that has really become a big part of my work, talking about sexuality, both with our audience and with a network of experts to really like push the conversation forward on the topic of female sexuality. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you so much, Cecile. And we have Angela, who has been on one of our panels before, and we love working with Dr. Angela Tan. Angela, can you tell us more about your work, please?
Sure. Hi, my name is Angela. Nice to meet all of you online, and glad that Olivia is inviting us again to come on board to share with us a very meaningful topic about orgasm. I think it's very important to know about pleasure. And pain and pleasure are often just a line apart, but then how do we then derive pleasure for something that has such a heavy taboo on it? And this is what we're going to discover today. So what I do, well, my day job is actually a doctor, so I see patients with cough, flu, running nose, etc., very normal and standard stuff. I also work as an intimacy coach, where I work with couples and individuals on relationship challenges, bedroom challenges, starting from young couples who are first timers, to couples who have children and find it difficult to revive their passion, and to older couples or couples who, due to medical conditions, have challenges in the bedroom. I work with them. On the social front, I'm also currently working with survivors of sexual abuse, as well as domestic violence, to look at how can they have a more integrated healing experience. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I'm going to pop the sharing screen off now. Okay. So let's begin. And I wanted to start by just talking about some of the research that I gathered in the lead up to this panel. From my perspective, as I started to research more about menstrual health over the last 5 years and realized that I was actually quite disempowered when it came to this part of my life and my connection with my body in general, I really started to look at my own sexuality. And I started to realize that I was one of many, many women who had really framed my initial sexual experiences really under a male lens. That includes anything from faking orgasms, which, by the way, 78% of women who follow me on Instagram have also attested to doing. And I think there was oftentimes just a kind of sort of jokey approach to this notion of faking orgasms, when actually, when you unpick it, it's extremely problematic. And Cecile, I wanted to ask you to start with, could you share some of the statistics around female pleasure, whether it's faking orgasms, not reaching orgasm, really what is the kind of status quo for women today?
Okay. That's a big question. I think when it comes to what the research shows about the female orgasm and what you were saying about how society has constructed a specific role play when it comes to sex, which is really focused on penetration and which is very focused on orgasm. We know that 70% of women need clitoral stimulation to reach climax, and only 20% of women can actually reach climax only through vaginal penetration. So basically the model that we've been taught that sex doesn't work for most people with vulvas. It just doesn't get them to an orgasm. And those numbers are a bit shocking when you put them in contrast to our understanding of our own anatomy. I think it was a study that was done in the UK by a charity a few years back to understand how people know the male and the female anatomy. And 6 out of 10 women could correctly map the male anatomy, but only a third of them could correctly map the entire female anatomy. And still in this study, which is consistent with findings in other countries, up to 30% of other people with vulvas or people with penises cannot locate the clitoris on the anatomy on the vulva, and the clitoris has a very central role in female pleasure. So that's what research shows is basically a big gap in our knowledge and our understanding of our pleasure anatomy versus a pleasure gap that really translates into how we are experiencing our pleasure and how the fact that we have been deserved by sex education really shows in the way we are experiencing sex and pleasure as women.
Okay, fantastic. And Jingjin, you also are the founder of a sexual pleasure brand. Can you tell us also what you saw with relation to our lack of education, understanding around female pleasure that actually inspired you to start your company?
So for me, I think what is interesting in my background, because I spent half of my life in China, half of my life in Germany. And although that we say, I think Dr. Angela will understand me, in Asia, we say 男尊女卑. So women are somewhat inferior than men. And there is a big discrepancy between the Western culture and the Asian culture in the sense of asking what you want. When I'm living in Germany, that, you know, also building this company, we have interviewed many, many Western women, Asian women. The biggest difference you can sense is that, I mean, sexual pleasure, this kind of stigma, this is everywhere in the world, if it's in terms of female sexual wellness. However, if you ask a Western woman, say, okay, in the bedroom, for example, whether you're alone or with your partner, seeking of sexual pleasure, if you want something, would you speak up? Is that a problem? I get many of the feedback from my friends or from the survey we have done with Western women say, why would you even think that's a problem? You ask what you want, right? Why can't you ask what you want? But growing up in China, in the Asian culture, asking something, especially for pleasure, this only the bad girls do it in a way. So these are the girls that your parents wouldn't want you to be friends with. So we were brought up in this way that we say, okay, the good girls are quiet and do not speak up, do not challenge the status quo. Therefore, if you don't know how to explore yourself, how to own your pleasure, how do you expect your partner actually to know it? Therefore, the brand is there. We really aim to normalize sexual wellness for every woman, especially in Asia, in daily lives, and empower women to own the pleasure and create the safe space for women to explore and exchange.
Okay, thank you. Angela, from your work, can you really see those same trends in Singapore, for example, when it comes to the stigmatization of women wanting to take ownership of our own sexual pleasure and being judged typically for doing that?
Yes, I do, because in Asia, women are deemed to be, more demure, and that's appropriate. And if you are too wild, you are being deemed as a slut, if I were to put it very bluntly, as a whore, if I were even to put it more bluntly, and that's the label of that. And then it's all right, for guys to be talking about masturbation. It's all right for guys to have, flings. I mean, it's very typical, if a relationship were to have a problem and it's due to a third party, most people unfortunately will assume that it's the male who actually have an affair. So whether good or bad, the male gender is associated with somebody who is more flirtatious, which is okay to have more partners and it's okay to be more sexually inhibited. Whereas, the female, in order to be more well accepted by society, they have to be more quiet about what their preferences or even their sexual inclinations are. So this is what we do see quite often in Asia. Yeah.
How is that shifting in the last few years? Do you see a trend with regards to attitudes becoming more open, and how can we really push that forward, Angela?
Well, I guess with all the movement that have been ongoing for the last decade or so, especially with the internet becoming more and more of a platform for people to share things, and I guess this is a trend that is picking up, that women are more willing to explore or being okay with sharing what they like and what they will find pleasure in. And as we go along, we do see that in general, women is also becoming more dominant in relationships. It's not just men who say, everything we'll do and then that's the main thing. So nowadays I'm starting to see couples where the woman is more dominant, and it's also an issue and challenge that I had to deal with as well in my sessions. So it's kind of interesting how that has kind of shifted that way.
Right, okay. And Cecile, I guess from a brand perspective, I think, brands like yours are really behind a lot of this inspiration for sharing and bringing the conversation around female sexual pleasure into common dialogue. What challenges since you guys launched have you seen with regards to taking this conversation mainstream, especially considering you've been around for a few years now, so you would have been very early in the market in Asia to actually do this?
Yeah, I think basically what we've seen in Asia and in other markets was a lot of resistance from retailers. So the specificity with Smile Makers is that we only sell in mainstream retail, so beauty, health, fashion stores, and we've never been sold in adult stores. So when we started the brand in 2013, that was very unique, and it still is, but at the time, retailers just did not understand why we were talking to them about sexual wellness. They were like, I'm a beauty retailer, or I'm a pharmacy chain. Why are you talking to me about vibrators? And we've seen a slow shift in mentalities by executing the category differently, by educating them and our audience about the health benefits of sexual wellness. I mean, when you experience pleasure, your body will release like a cocktail of hormones that have beneficial impacts for your physical and your mental health, like better sleep or pain relief for menstrual cramps. It counteracts the effects of cortisol. So there are a lot of health benefits. There is a rationale to feature sexual wellness within the wellness category. So it's been a long lobbying with retailers. It's been a long ongoing conversation with media, with influencers to really start the conversation. But you were asking how are things changing, and even in Asia. We've done a study in Taiwan in 2013, and then again in 2019, asking, among other things, how many people were using vibrators. And in 2013, only 26% of women, were saying that they had already used a vibrator. In 2019, that number went up to 60%. Because of the development of mainstream retail for that category, but I think as well that mentalities are changing. So maybe the numbers were actually higher in 2013, but people were not comfortable admitting publicly or in a survey, yes, I'm using a vibrator. Now it's becoming more acceptable. So I think right now what we're seeing is that this conversation is gaining really momentum and getting support, including in Southeast Asia, including in Singapore and Hong Kong, where I see more and more initiatives from young people, from students association, with more retailers like ZaZaZu, or more initiatives like that are really like trying to like grow the momentum here and really foster more conversations around sexual wellness.
I love that. And I think what I want to do at this point is really, because I feel like within this panel, we have, a lineup of women who have been brought up in different parts of the world. And I'd love to know more, Cecile, let's start with you specifically about what your education surrounding female sexual pleasure was, and where there was, if there was, a significant turning point. What would that have been, do you think, in taking ownership of your own sexual pleasure?
Yeah. I think so. I was brought up in France, and my family was neither very conservative nor very progressive. Like, there was no problem around the topic of sex, but I couldn't go to my mother and talk to her openly about, I don't know, contraception, for example. But it was first in school, you would have sex education that at least would explain how you can get pregnant, how you can get STDs, how to have safe sex. Nothing about pleasure, but at least you could understand how your body works, which is already important. There are a lot of places where you don't even get that. And I think two things were playing a role, like friends. It was quite okay to talk about sex with friends your own age. And when we did research on the topic of how often do you talk about sex with friends, we found, for example, that in Singapore, the numbers are quite low on that item. Like, it's not something that seems very natural and easy to go to talk about sex with friends. And the other things were media, like frankly, shows like Sex and the Cities. They're quite eye-opening when it's the only kind of resource you have. You're like, oh, I can have that kind of conversation. You can be that direct and specific when you talk about sex. Sex can be so adventurous. So I do think that media have played a role as well. But what was really lacking was proper sex education on pleasure. And I mean, like, science-based sex education. I think I was 27 when I found out on Wikipedia the exact anatomy of the clitoris, because I could not understand what I was feeling. So it was really like you have some elements in your teens to start navigating, but you don't really understand how to explore your sexual self and to really take charge of your sexuality completely free of guilt and shame. Like, because even if, like, we could say France is a progressive country, well, there's still a lot of Christian values. Like, there is a Christian culture there that keeps sex as quite of a taboo topic.
Jingjin, what about you? When we spoke previously, you described how you felt quite different to your peers growing up in China. You were surrounded by a very conservative approach to sex, yet you kind of were able to cut through that and kind of, I guess, establish your own approach. Is that a fair comment? Can you tell us more about how you managed to do that?
So I think my angle was a little bit different. I think to building this company, one of the angle was actually the fact that I echo completely what Cecile has just shared. At the end of the day, sexual education is poor everywhere, and it's poor, especially in Asia. It's rather a biology class that prays abstinence. And the porn was actually the only Bible on instruction in our generation. I'm the kid of 1984. And nothing wrong with porn, but as a parent, if you look at it this way, we have interviewed 1,000 women. This is actually common sense. We wouldn't even need to interview women. I do not know a single woman in my life that they say my first time was great. But then if you would approach a young man, whereas the first time of a woman is always linked with STD, with may I get pregnant, it's painful, and he does not know what he was doing. I did not know what I was doing. So at the end, he ended up with a mess. But then for a young man, actually, it's rather the progress of, okay, now today you made it. Now you become a man evolve from a boy to a man. But for the girl, you actually lost your virginity. Oh my God. So the gap actually between the pleasure is quite big. If already the pleasure gap is already starting from the school age, how can you actually expect the society in the later on your life, because your first time is so demonized, it's so bad at that time, how could you evolve a positive relationship with yourself or with pleasure just in generally? So growing up in China, as I shared before, the society educates you to be a good girl, actually means that a quiet girl, you do not speak up and do not, against authority, means teacher, educator, you need to be socially conform, and you have to do greatly in academic. That's all you need. Sexual pleasure, oh my God. In China, as you remember, we have girls in 14, so teenage girls, where in the Western culture, they start to show, wear spaghetti tops and then to show their femininity. In China, people actually wrap up their breasts to show you, okay, it's somewhat a shame to have breasts because it's like, it's just you're showing your female self. So I was kind of against all odds. I was naturally expressive, loud, and asking a lot of questions, a lot of whys, and that was not desirable at all. And therefore, I was often punished and then recognized as the bad girl. And then this experience actually somewhat took away my identity and the confidence as a girl, and later on as a woman. So I have somewhat struggled my whole life to find the right identity and gain back the confidence that women generally should have without, you don't need to be the CEO or CFO or whatever. I have reached a lot in my life, but still, I just cannot find the confidence somewhere. A later stage in my life, I see countless career women in the same career stage as I am, CEO, CFO, you can just name it, and who have everything that people envy or desire. But deep inside, even they are still trying to look to build their identity and confidence. And this is somewhere where I found, okay, what is the angle deep inside that I can tackle to help women to build identity and confidence? And one day I realized that was actually sexuality, because sexuality informs identity. And if we are securing our own identity, and that builds actually the ultimate confidence, and confidence at the end is what empowers us to go out, challenge the status quo, and change the world.
And I think if anybody's in any doubt as to the benefits of taking ownership over your sexuality, I think both of your answers really do encompass both the physical benefits of taking this kind of ownership and indeed the psychological benefits as well, and really being able to advance ourselves and reach our full potentials as women, right? Angela, you talk to so many women and couples about this. What challenges do you face in really impressing upon couples actually the importance of understanding female sexual pleasure?
I guess the biggest challenge here is not just with regards to the women having the inability to speak up. It's also the same thing with men. In fact, even though men are great masturbators, they have problem telling their partners what they enjoy too. Because as a masturbator, you have a certain technique or certain style of bringing pleasure to yourself. But in the bedroom, it's a teamwork. And when this communication doesn't go across, actually no one's get the pleasure, even though there is an end. So my greatest challenge is to getting both partners to see it's okay to tell your partner what you like and what you don't quite like, but in a more like gentle. You kind of don't say no, don't do this, because when you say don't do this, it becomes very disruptive to the momentum that's being built up. Instead, I'll encourage the couple to say, okay, I would like more of this. Whatever that you did earlier was great. Would you like to do more of that, or can you go a bit faster? It will make me feel better. So a lot of positive reaffirmation during the bedroom session is where I really work with couples on. And it seems like it's a new thing. Every time I bring it up, I get surprised looks like, do you actually talk so much when you're having sex? Yeah, so I was like, oh, well, it is part of the practice, you know, to get it going and things like that. So this is my greatest challenge so far in helping couple attain pleasure. And it's also during this time when they are okay with both parties being vulnerable, that true connections happens. If not, I will actually label the action as, you know, you guys are just using each other's bodies to masturbate, if I have to put it bluntly, and there's not much connection that happens. So it's this verbal communication and the tactile communication that allows for connection to happen. And that's what really brings pleasure to both parties.
Angela, and I think you know, without without somebody like yourself in our lives, you know, a coach to walk us through this with our partners. And I must say, I'm referring specifically to heterosexual sex when I talk about the research that we did over the past week. But really, even that kind of conversation that feels like it's positive affirmation, people are terrified of it. And I think that's what I saw when I was talking about who has ever faked an orgasm or who does so regularly. And the common response was, I'm scared of offending or hurting my partner. And again, in this instance, we're talking about heterosexual relationships. So to somebody that doesn't have the support of a coach like you on hand, how can they genuinely start that conversation in a way that's not scary? And have you seen partners be hurt by that conversation being raised?
Okay, to be honest, because those who come to my sessions, they're generally more open. Yeah. So when I make a suggestion, they'll be slightly surprised. But they'll be more than happy to take it up as a part of their practice. I wouldn't say it'll be hurting. What then becomes hurtful is when you deliver it at the wrong time and you make the partner feel wrong, and also when this is not pre-set up. So I guess what happens in the pre-set up that is important is that even in a day-to-day conversation, is the couple okay with communicating with each other, their own challenges in their personal lives, and things about the other partner that irritates them or irks them. You see, so it's not just about bedroom communication, it's also about communication outside the bedroom. Is there already openness that's present? Is there already vulnerability that's present? Is there already the love and courage that helps each other move and progress in their relationship and as individuals that's happening? Because if all this are not happening, it can't happen in the bedroom where something more intimate in nature, you see. So I guess also as a base, are the individuals in the relationship having full ownership of themselves as individuals as well? What I mean by that, by like what Jingjin said, it took her a journey to find out who she is. Okay, and like many of us, we all struggle at one point in time with our identity. And it also took me a journey to find out who well, a big part of me is, or maybe there's still some parts of me I don't know yet, I'm still finding out. But at least I am contented and happy with my current self, and I'm proud to be myself at this point in time. And that gives me the assurity and the security that I need to voice out my thoughts and my needs from time to time. You see, so it's not just about the bedroom thing, it has to be put in a holistic picture. Do you know who you are? Are you comfortable in being who you are? And if you're not quite there yet, do you have the willingness to find out who you really are? You see, so that kind of sums it all up that way.
Yeah, I love that holistic approach, and I think that's everything that we try and encourage at Luüna as well. You know, taking ownership of every part of your body, your physical health, your psychological health. Cecile, Jingjin, I'll start with you, Cecile. Can you walk us through where somebody should start if they are looking to explore, I guess, their own sexuality as an individual? If somebody has been typically, you know, a little bit hesitant with regards to masturbation, doesn't perhaps have a really open dialogue about sex within their friendship group, what would you say is a good place to start? Because it can feel very overwhelming to kind of look at the array of options out there, like, where do I begin? How do I know what's right for me? And I think, you know, people need to have that good first time experience to kind of push them through on this journey, or it can feel quite daunting.
Yeah. I think taking some time to like do your own sex education is really, really useful. And there are a lot of online resources, like the Planned Parenthood or the King's Institute. We have launched a sex education program called Vulva Talk. So it's specifically on female pleasure. But I would say that understanding your body better, knowing the different parts. So now I have like a 3D print of a clitoris. And I think just knowing what a clitoris really is and how it reacts to arousal and how it drives pleasure, or how you can get pleasure from exploring your different erogenous zones, that really helps. First, understanding better your sensations. I think in those platforms, you can also interact with other people, and you can see that you're not the only one who's feeling overwhelmed, who hasn't had the right resources. And what I also really like with sex education platforms, whichever they are, is that they also deconstruct a lot of misconceptions that we have about what sex is about. So sex is not only about having orgasms. Sex is not only about having partner sex, like solo sex, masturbation, that's also sex. It's not only if it's with a partner, and if it's with a male partner, it doesn't have to be about penetration. So it's really about debunking those myths so that you can understand and make space for yourself to write your own scripts and to say, but actually I can have sex with my partner only by doing, I don't know, kissing and oral sex, and that will be sex. And I don't even have to be stressed about orgasm. And if you remove the pressure to orgasm, then you kind of address the question about, should I fake an orgasm? Because you no longer make sex about performance and orgasms. So really my first step would be like, just spend some time online or in books. There's a great book by Emily Nagoski, like Come As You Are, which is like a great handbook to just getting acquainted with your own body and getting curious about your pleasure. So start with that. Start by doing your own sex education.
Could I ask you just to share a couple of hot tips using the 3D model you just showed? Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience today that you think is important for them to know?
About the clitoris?
Yeah.
Yes. So the clitoris is an organ that is actually more than the eye can see. So that's the glands here, and that's what we usually, like here, that's what we usually see. And that's what we can stimulate when we stimulate externally the vulva. But it has an erectile structure inside our body. So it's basically lodged between the pubic bone, the vagina wall, and it wraps around the vagina and the urethra. And it comes from the same embryo cell as the penis. So it's an erectile organ. And when we get aroused, it grows and it just becomes engorged with blood, and it really behaves like a little penis basically, and it plays a central role in pleasure. So the question that we get the most often when it comes to partner sex is, why can't I have an orgasm? And often with that question, there is an underlying one, which is, why can't I have an orgasm during penetrative sex? And often it's like having orgasm through clitoral stimulation is having an orgasm, and you need to explore clitoral stimulation to have more pleasure during penetration. So yeah, that would be the tip I would give related to the clitoris.
And I don't know about the audience, but the first time I learned about how much there was to the clitoris versus just what you're told or what you can see, my mind was blown. And it is such a complex and important part of our bodies. And the fact that we aren't educated about it, even from a biological perspective, really goes so far in showing how much women, I think, are subjugated when it comes to our relationships with our bodies. This is such fundamental, important information we should be equipped with, and can really change our lives when we are.
The knowledge of this whole structure is actually quite recent. It dates back, like the fact connecting all these parts as one organ only dates back to the early 2000s with a urologist in Australia, Ellen O'Connor, who did research by dissecting cadavers and doing MRI. And she realized that all the glands and those bulbs and those tissues, they're all connected, and that's the clitoris. Before that, we didn't even know. So 20 years ago, we didn't know what the clitoris was in its entirety, which is shocking.
It's shocking, and I think we see it with menstrual health as well. You know, something that has been around since the beginning of humanity is so under discussed and under researched. And it makes you think what we might know in another 20 years about this part of our bodies that we all have. Jingjin, when it comes to starting this journey, what would be your hot tip for anybody wanting to explore their own sexuality?
I think I might have a little bit, again, against the odds. I mean, because now we're focusing a lot on, you know, how is the vagina look like, how is the vulva and all. But don't forget one thing, it's self-experimentation, exploration as well. Don't forget, sometimes we know, we have interviewed many women think that I still don't know where is actually the clit. I have read, you know, some of them attended the great class from Smile Maker actually a year ago, before COVID. So the class was great, but actually when I come or when I experience pleasure, it's because I tried things myself. Therefore, I know, because everybody, we say that every woman is unique as a fingerprint. What pleases you does not please me. Just because you say, okay, I know where the clit is, it's supposed to be somewhere that, you know, give me pleasure. It might be valid for someone, but not valid for all. Very often in sexual educations, again, we have interviewed some women, they say after a sexual education class from US, from old school, from some of the great names, then they get a little bit more, even more confused. I say, okay, now I'm even more confused because I somewhat lost my intuition. So what we have been doing, and then also based on the empirical study, what we have done, is that the women who have the greatest sex have two things in common. Firstly, they know what are their likes and dislikes. That, you know, some people love external stimulation, some like internal, something like somebody like wet, somebody like dry. Lubricants plays a great role, and so on. Explore yourself, discover things yourself on your body. So self-exploration. Once you know what pleases you, if you don't even know what pleases you, how do you expect a second party to please you in that way? And the second point is actually very often the women we have interviewed and saying, I have great sex with my husband before, because women's body is different. Pre-marriage, after marriage, pregnancy, after pregnancy, menopause. Women experience so many stages. Our clit, our vagina, everything changes, right? So this even need to encourage women more to explore after, for example, I have a baby, I have this 2 years old, and things definitely have changed. And then what aroused me before does not arouse me now anymore. So, but then now I have much less time to explore. So then what we also find out, the second point, what I want to emphasize here is, often it's not that you lost your orgasm. Often it's also you don't have the headspace for orgasm anymore. In Asia, we live in small condos, in small apartments, very often in Singapore, in Hong Kong, China, people live with their parents. They are just next door. Huh? how to explore yourself, how to own your orgasm. When you really get it there, you want to scream, you say, I loved it. How? There, you have to hold it back. So it's not actually, sometimes it's also the circumstance around it. We interviewed some moms. They're saying, oh my God, you want me to get orgasm? You book me a staycation in Capella, get rid of my husband, my kids, my everybody. Just for 3 hours, I will come. Believe me. Things like that. So sometimes we don't, it's the self-exploration, and also to know what is it the circumstance that you don't have the headspace for that currently, or is it really just something you have to explore?
Angela, is there anything you want to add to those two? Fantastic.
Yes, I mean, I love what Cecile and Jingjin have said. I just want to add another point that I think might be relevant is that, you know, the biggest sex organ in our body is actually the brain. So it's an imagination that really turns people on. So, you know, it's just not about bringing a vibrator to your clit and then make things happen. It's also about the foreplay that you have with yourself or with your partner, the imagination that can take days to brew. It can be a romantic novel. It can be some drama serials with some romantic scenes, with some foreplay sexual scenes. It doesn't matter. It's how your brain picks it up and makes it a whole lot more interesting. You know, I was telling a couple that, yes, you know, you have kids, you have no time, it's all in the rush. And foreplay is important. So how do you make it happen? Can you send each other flirtatious tags along the way in the whole day, such that by the time the kids are in bed, you are ready for it? Versus starting the foreplay only when the kids are in bed and both or you are dead tired and don't have the motivation anymore. You know, let's change how things are working in that sequence. All right, so that's how the brain takes part. Another point to add is also about understanding your own body, like what Jingjin said about exploration, not just the genitalias, but is there anywhere else in your body that brings you sensations? Is there any part of your body that you have an extra feeling for? You know, some people may not even be in the clitoris or the nipples, can be, you know, the neck, the lower back or something, or even dressing something that is more sensual or bring out the curves in your body that might actually trigger this whole the whole feeling of feeling sexy and bring you closer to orgasm that way. And of course, to find out, is there any body parts that you have an issue with that you kind of extremely detest, and if your partner or yourself to touch this, you're totally turned off, then is there a way for healing to happen so that you grow to love that part of your body too? Yeah, I guess that's what I want to share. Yeah,
I love those, and I think from what I've seen, it's really also a question of reframing how we consider something like masturbation as well, because I think it has existed on this binary of something that's perverse, or maybe even something that you just have to kind of tick the box to do. And let's face it, sometimes it is a kind of tick the box, like I'm going to do this and go about my day. But actually, I think from what you guys are saying as well, it's about reframing it as this moment of self-care. So it's a process, a psychological and physical process that can really help us, like we said earlier, reach our full potentials and really get to understand our own identity, as with any other self-care activity, right?
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks, guys. I think we're going to hand over to our audience now and see if we've got any questions. So, audience, please feel free to share any questions that you've got. You can just put a virtual hand up. Anything that you want to know about how the clitoris is formed, any more hot tips from our panelists about how to begin this journey of exploration. I know we always have questions about how to reframe these quite taboo topics with the next generation, so with children. Jingjin, I know you have a daughter or a son?
Oh boy, yeah, 2-year-old boy.
Okay, you have a 2-year-old boy, and we spoke about how parents can actually normalize conversation around sexual pleasure. Can you give any parents in the audience some advice about how to navigate those conversations?
I think, so this is not promoting ZaZaZu now, generally to have a space, because we did this research and saying, you know, one of the questions we asked the audience is, this is our research based on 1,000 women in Southeast Asia, aging 25 to 55. Who is the least person you want to talk about sex with? Unanimously, parents. So because, and why is that? It's because the parents' generation, in this generation, they haven't got great education as well. If you ask me, okay, if I were asked my mom, I asked my mom actually, I think like a year ago, when I somehow thought about already building this business, I was like, have you ever masturbated? My mom always fainted. And it's just that something that she is uncomfortable to talk about, or in the sexual education in schools, even teachers are uncomfortable to talk about. How would you expect that your audience could to engage with that topic? So we actually need an independent platform, somewhere an independent authority, that a safe space where people can go and ask a specialist and then approachable women with education like Dr. Angela. And like we have here in Singapore, also many other sexologists were extremely approachable, and it does not necessarily have to be, just need to be more consolidated into a platform where this is the authority to go. But for the parents, I think the greatest tip we've got from the parents panel survey we got is, there's this great parent saying, the first experience we have with our daughter on alcohol is that we took her drinking. So, and then she drank a beer one after, and until she threw up, actually. So this way, she actually, under our monitoring, she somewhat got her limit. So she knew, okay, in this circumstance, after 3 beers, I'm drunk. So it's a monitored process. So, and then with sexual education is somewhat the same. We always wish that our kids are virgin maybe for the rest of their lives, but especially people who have daughters, it won't. So sooner or later they will have it, when you rather have it in a monitored and structured way, rather than let them close their eyes and then we say in Asia, don't look, don't tell, don't ask, and then let them explore themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Angela, you are also a mother, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I have a daughter.
Yes. And would you like to add anything to that advice from Jingjin about how parents can navigate this conversation with children? And especially, I think, why is there that attitude? I've heard it from so many people, especially as Jingjin said about daughters. No, she's going to be a virgin forever. Obviously, they're joking, but it really stems from somewhere quite deep and dark, I think. I don't really hear it about boys. It's like, no, he'll go out there and, as soon as he gets virginity, he'll become a man.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it comes to think that, virginity seems to be like the treasure of what a woman has, and that signify how pure and how, up there you are on the pedestal. So as a owner of the daughter, i.e. the parent, you want to keep your treasure on the pedestal for as long as you can. That's how Asians are being taught. Like, how in the past, emperors will only choose concubines who are virgins. They will never take someone, who has have sex with somebody else. Because if not, the emperor will be wearing somebody's dirty pants in that way. Okay, which would like to fold this up with a question that somebody asked about how to balance safe sex and sexual pleasure in terms of STI. Okay, very important education I'll love to give my girls. Okay, so having safe sex is about having protected sex. So by knowing how do people get STI, you will know how to circumvent it. So it has nothing to do with pleasure. So we do know that STI can be transmitted through either oral sex or penetrative sex. So by having a condom at most times, or even at off times, during such context, during oral, anal, or vaginal sex, that will then help to reduce the STI. And of course, knowing who your partner is. You don't want to kind of go out with somebody that you don't know and have sex with 100 people before you have. And then that increases your chance of having an STI. So by choosing the right partner, having the appropriate protection, it will make you feel safe generally in that way. So that is how you kind of balance it up that way.
Thank you so much. We also had another question about how to find the G-spot. Cecile, do you have any advice for this particular question?
Yeah, I think on that I will echo what Jingjin was saying about self-exploration. Not everybody has a G-spot. The G-spot is not at the same place for everyone, and it can change literally spots during a day or during the life of a woman. So it's really about being curious. What we call the G-spot is a place where the walls of the vagina come in contact with the internal structure of the clitoris. So basically, when we talk about G-spot stimulation, is how do you stimulate the internal clitoris through the vagina. And that creates a very sensitive zone in the vagina for some. So we know that to explore and find it, you just basically need to explore inside the vagina. But a tip that we've got from our sexologist partners is that for the G-spot to become sensitive, you need to be quite aroused already. So to start with external stimulation of the clitoris or the vulva, like to really build arousal so that the whole region becomes more engorged with blood and more reactive to touch. And to then explore most likely the front wall of the vagina, but for some it can be towards the back. And the type of pressure that can work can be a bit different than thrusting, but it can be more like intense and focused stimulation of that specific spot. So it's really about like try and misses, and that's just normal. Like if you don't find it on the first try, that's absolutely normal. It's really about becoming curious about your pleasure and self-exploration.
Thank you. Jingjin, I'm going to ask you the next question. Have you encountered girls who've been traumatized by the expectation that girls shouldn't masturbate? I'm an Asian living in HK. I was caught masturbating at 12 by my mum, and she didn't talk to me for a week, and I still feel guilty at 24 years old when I watch porn.
Many. So we are going to survey where we have sexual in Asia. This is Asian context, right? Chinese culture. This is the part that I'm covering. Masturbation is called 手淫. It actually means kind of, I do not even, maybe a question to Dr. Angela. In this word, I do not even know how to translate that into English. It's actually kind of, it's a really bad word. It's like
slut and more.
Slutty hands, no? How dare you, like more into the prostitution side already, really not even bad girl doing it, really, really bad girls doing this. So that we have interviewed many women, they are traumatized because they were exploring themselves. And then the parents came in or they found out something. And then one of the survey we had, a lady was saying that she brought up by her dad. And then her dad found out that she was masturbating, so he somehow observed her. And then she felt so ashamed about himself that he actually, was like, beat her up in a way. And he said, how could you do something that's so shameful, bring shame into our family? But then she somehow felt a need of herself of, doing so. There are certain needs. And at that time, and I thought I was talking to a 16-year-old girl. She was 28, and because the fact that she was unmarried, she did not have a partner, and the dad was like, how would you ever get married if you touch yourself, if you show in yourself? Yeah, and then we have actually many this kind of cases, some of them even saying that the experience has harassed them their whole life, versus that people get harassed by a man, for example. We have one survey and saying that actually I was caught up when I was younger, but then in the uni here in Singapore, I was harassed by a man, actually sexually. And then the first experience were way worse than the actual harassment. So this is actually where the education part must kick in, that we need to start with that self-pleasure or self-masturbation. This is the word that we Asian don't like, though. Also, according to our survey, masturbation seems to be a very bad word. Therefore, people don't feel comfortable about talking about this. Therefore, we say self-care, self-pleasure to find the right way to, the society need to find pleasure to educate next generation, saying that self-pleasure is perfectly fine. This is just a way to identify who you are, identify your body.
Thank you. We have so many good questions. I'm actually going to combine two because they're about communications, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. Angela. So one is, if physical intimacy has died down in a relationship, how would you suggest to bring it up with a partner? And then the other issue about communication is, boys usually orgasm first. How do we tell them that we're not finished?
Okay. So if the physical intimacy that are in a relationship is also about building your daily physical intimacy. Do you still hug and kiss when you say goodbye? Do you still hold hands when you go out? Because with kids, most of the time you're holding the kids' hands because they're running all over the place and not holding each other's hands anymore. And we have stopped kissing because you're also always kissing the kids, you know. So this has to be reviewed before the bedroom scene can be reviewed. You see, if these are not done on a regular basis, if physical intimacy in the couple, then you go downhill. And also to know that, are you still seeing each other as lovers? Or are you seeing each other as parents? Because I hear a lot of parents call each other papa and mama. I'm like, okay, are you seeing your wife as your mother right now? Are you seeing your husband as your father right now? So it's about that whole change in mindset as when we have kids, and that's what usually happens in marriages when kids. And yes, so how do we tell boys you're not done? Just tell them you're not done. Shall we go for a second round? You know, or next time set it up. You know, can I come first before you come? It's a bit challenging, but it's whole thing about communications. And I have seen couples who have this idea that both of them are supposed to come at the same time, and if they don't, they have failed in a particular session. So it's also about understanding that it's okay to come at different times. It's just like how you like wanton and like bak chor mee. They're all me, but just different. Yeah.
And I want to add something there with regards to a personal experience I had. So I think when it comes to losing horniness, I know this is something I went through when I was younger, when I was first starting to be on the contraceptive pill. And I wasn't aware at the time, no doctor told me that actually the pill could really affect things like my sex drive, because our sex drive is related to our hormonal health. And so I think actually the question about why am I not feeling horny is, it can be so many things, and it's really important to assess your lifestyle as much as it is to assess your relationship, perhaps even more of the former sometimes, because it could be anything from like your hormonal health yourself, or it could be like your own mental state in relation to stress at work or in your personal life. So I think it's really about like understanding that your desires, your sexual desires, can be linked to your physical health in so many ways as well. Dr. Angela, would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. So if someone has been a long time smoker, drinking excessively, excessive caffeine intake, overworked, not having enough sleep, stress about something, definitely there'll be no more horniness. And if you're seeing your partner as an enemy who doesn't wash the dishes, that's a problem too.
Yeah. Absolutely, because I think someone here asked, I've lost my horniness. So related to lack of intimacy in a relationship, I think lack of horniness in yourself. There are so many things, and I know when I was going through that when I was younger, it was really detrimental to my mental health actually, because there was no rhyme or reason why somebody who was young should be, in my mind, at the peak of my sexual career, didn't have that desire. So that's why I think this conversation is so important, because we can really start to blame ourselves if we don't have these innate feelings of horniness, right? Okay, let's go. I feel media, movies, and pornography create an illusory bubble of sexual pleasure. I'd love to hear the panel's opinion on this. Jingjin, would you like to comment on this? Because we've talked a little bit about pornography. And do you think there is a link between pornography and perhaps people's like unrealistic expectations of what the sexual experience should be?
No, totally. And I think I having seen one thing up front, I think certain, like Dr. Angela said at the beginning, sometimes pornography is not always bad. Some great pornography actually ignites the imagination. Sometimes some people are very visual, so they need to see something to get aroused. Some people are more like to hear some things or read some things. So pornography generally is not bad. However, pornography cannot be the Bible on the instructions. This is what we have been keeping saying. And in Asia, even back in Germany, pornography is the first 98% of the kids, the first education they have, the how-to is not by browsing through internet, it's browsing through pornographies. The pornography has the two, I think this is quite common, two biggest trouble is that they give young women especially the sense that, for example, your vulva is not perfect. Because this should be shaved, it should be perfectly shaved. Therefore, there are products that whiten your vagina. Oh my God, where are we living here? It was worse enough that we have to whiten our skin in Asia. And now you have to whiten your vagina. And then this is because somewhat, I think this was the previous panel last week that I do not
Yeah.
Vivian, she mentioned that as well, and saying that the pornography give you a wrong illusion of how a woman should unfortunately behave during sex in many genres, because this is an industry led by men, and the products are made, or pornography are made by men for men to use on women in a way. Therefore, this is the pornography that has somehow demonized the sexual pleasure part for women. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, well, at least the mainstream popular pornography that I've been privy to, it certainly doesn't encourage anyone to respect non-penetrative stimulation, as we've been talking about tonight, because it is ultimately made for men. Cecile, there's a question I'd like to pose to you. I've been too reliant on my vibrator, and now I don't feel as much pleasure with my boyfriend. How can I fix this?
Okay. Well, I think my tip would be maybe stop the vibrator for a while and see how to reconnect with your boyfriend, or maybe use the vibrator with your boyfriend. That's also a great way, like, to show them how you experience pleasure on your own. You could even show to them using it on yourself and make it into like some sort of foreplay, and that's a way to build intimacy and to communicate pleasure in a way that's not through words. Because when we were talking about how it can be so intimidating to talk about sex, maybe a first way to start communicating about sex can be wordless and be more about showing things that you like, guiding your partner about things that you like, and a vibrator can be a great tool to that end.
Yeah, and I feel like also an answer to that question would be like, go back to perhaps like enjoying that journey, because you might uncover other things that you like. I know it's great to have a tool and a method that can like get you to the end result really quickly, and you can understand your body in that way. But maybe it's a case of sometimes when you're with a new partner, going back, enjoying that journey, and knowing that it might take you a little bit longer to get there, but being okay with that, right?
Yeah. Plus, I think like with a vibrator, if you have a vibrator routine and you know you're gonna have an orgasm after, I don't know, 1 minute or two, that's great. But with a partner, it's going to be a very different experience. It's more about intimacy and pleasure rather than getting an orgasm quickly.
Yeah. I just want to ask a question actually, because somebody raised a point when I asked my question on Instagram today about faking orgasms. A couple of people said that the reason they faked it is because they were bored and they wanted it to be over. So I think we're talking about, like, you know, the question was posed earlier, how do we communicate with somebody that we haven't come yet? But actually a really difficult thing to bring up would be like, I'm kind of done, can we stop? Angela, how would we navigate that situation? Because that is hard to bring up. That's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, that conversation maybe shouldn't happen in the bedroom itself. Should be taken outside the bedroom as part of what I would say the regular review of, in a job, you will have regular review with your superior when things are going well or not going well. But in relationship, I realize nobody does that. Yeah. And then when people sign up for marriages, neither do they go through a JD of what is expected of a husband and a wife, and that thing just happened. And this is where all the conflicts happen. So back to communication, it's not just about in the bedroom, it's the holistic communication between a partner. You know, if things are not working, do we have a safe space to talk it out? If things are not working in the bedroom, you know, how then do we have a session to discuss what's going to work better? You know, I find that perhaps you are pleasuring yourself too much. I feel neglect, and hence I got bored. Maybe can we do this instead? And I'll feel more engaged in the activity.
Yeah.
So having a safe space to discuss things like that.
And it's obviously detrimental to both sides, because I think whenever I've brought up the conversation about fake orgasms to men, I mean, sometimes the reaction is quite defensive, and sometimes the reaction is utterly terrified, especially when I shared that 78% of women following me on Instagram had faked an orgasm. So I think it works in everybody's interest to facilitate this open dialogue. I mean, men don't want to be participating in us faking orgasms. This conversation, it's better that it be had, but obviously it is very difficult to initiate, right?
I'll just add one fun fact to the faking orgasm. While 75% of women have faked orgasm, 99% of men, seriously, 99% of the men believe that their partner has never faked orgasm before.
Very fun fact.
So ignorance is bliss here. Am I right to say that?
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's right. Okay, that's a lot of that's a lot of great acting, I think, going on there. We all deserve Oscars by the sounds of it.
I think on the faking orgasm question, there's also a matter of like there is pressure put on men to like be responsible for their partner's orgasm. So like the whole conversation is about how do we reinvent gender roles so where women can own their pleasure without being tagged as sluts, and men can like not be responsible for their partner's orgasm without being, I don't know, considered
Labeled as some macho man. If not, I'm not macho enough, I'm not good enough, I'm a lousy lover. Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, it's really a matter, I think, of gender roles, and right now it's creating this orgasm pressure for everybody. So women end up faking and men end up being very stressed about getting their partner to orgasm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the questions. Okay. I don't really make too much sound in bed, but my boyfriend likes it. I don't want to fake it either. What should I do about it? Angela, could you help us on that one?
Slightly tricky because okay, when we don't want or when we don't enjoy something, is it something that we are inhibited by? So for example, if I have a preconceived notion that if I make too much noise and therefore I'm a slut, then inherently I'll be inhibited by it. So one part is about knowing, is there anything about me that doesn't like it, and can I be neutral about it at least? Okay, then the other part is, okay, if the partner likes something, is there something else that both of you like too? So it's about finding the common points. So rather than making sounds, are there other things that both of you can enjoy together? So there are two parts to that answer.
I love that. Jingjin, do you want to add anything to that question?
I think I have to be honest on this because we research on this as well. We got this question actually from many women, not only on the, the noise part, and then something like, my boyfriend always like me to give a blowjob, but I actually don't like it, but I love him so much. How do I overcome that? I think just generally, how can women take the same, the conversation. I love what Dr. Angela said. At the end of the day, you need to ignite the conversation between couple because you are in the as intimacy as people could get through. If you cannot have the right conversation there, you do not dare to say things, your likes and dislikes, but then you do it once, you fake it once, you will have to fake all your lives because there will be no point where you will have to say, oh, I actually don't like it. And he was like, oh, how could you do that to me? So actually, the earlier the conversation, the better. And then you will be surprised. We actually had an interviewee. They're saying, if I was so scared that I told my boyfriend I actually never came. And we have in a one-to-one conversation, and he said, oh my God, the ego was suddenly low. And then he thought about it. Next day, he was like, okay, let's figure it out. Yeah. What can I do exactly? So you will be surprised of the reaction of your partner when you actually initiated the talks.
And for all you know, your boyfriend may not like the noise and just pretending that he likes too. We don't know, right?
Exactly.
So true. Such a good point. Okay. We have one last question. So even after having the headspace or an environment you can freely explore orgasm, where you can freely explore orgasm, how do you overcome the mental fear of letting go due to the unknown reaction? This might be connected to how people often laugh at certain orgasm reactions like squirting, etc. That's a really interesting point. I think, Jingjin, do you want to lead us through that? I think breaking that down, there's a lot of things that can happen. We can express ourselves in so many ways, physically, verbally. That fear of doing so, how can we tackle that?
The question that I'm sorry, I was a little bit distracted by the chat. I thought I want to answer some of the questions.
No worries.
Somebody was asking a question on my side. So could you just repeat that again? So how can you? Would you mind to repeat the question
again? No, not at all. So with everything that can happen when we're having an orgasm, you want to let go completely. You might be inclined to make a lot of noise, or you might be prone to like squirting, or whatever it might be, a physical reaction. How do you really let go in that moment with perhaps fear that somebody might make fun of that or not understand that reaction? I think that's what this question was getting at.
Firstly, you do not have, nobody have to understand or have a reaction. This is something that you very intimately doing yourself, right? We have a great tip actually from one of our interviewees as well. And she's saying at the end of the day, because very often if we explore something ourselves, scream, you need to have a safe space. So very often what she does is she actually changes apartment with her friends. So because then she felt that in her apartment, this is a different space. So change the location is one thing. And then listen to something listen to really, really loud music where you really want to explore something because you wouldn't hear yourself. This is actually one of the greatest hints we got actually from some of our interviewees saying that if you really want to explore myself, I rather enjoy, I want to scream out loud, then I actually just stuck in the earpod inside and then I cannot hear anything anymore. Then I really indulge myself into it and then left the word behind. So
I love that. I think I want to pick up on this question's focusing on squirting, because I'm immediately, and I can't think of the films or the popular culture material that's done this, but I'm thinking of a number of popular culture references that have really shamed this notion of squirting, where people have made fun of it and it's become something that's almost like very novelty. Do you guys know what I'm kind of referring to when I say that? Like, this is a physical reaction that some women have when we orgasm, and it hasn't necessarily been treated with respect when it comes to popular culture. Cecile, do you have any tips with regards to managing how someone might react to something like that, given the narrative around things like squirting? Oh, you're on mute, Cecile.
I wouldn't say that I'm not the best expert to answer on that. That's not a topic we cover or we discuss so much with our audience. What we have people like women asking us like, how can I learn how to squirt? As if it had become something that you have to do to prove to your partner that you've come, and to give like a physical and visible proof of the orgasm performance. So actually what we've seen from our audience is almost the exact opposite question, which is like, how can I trigger that reaction in my body leading to squirting? So I agree with you that the way squirting has been treated in media isn't really, I would say, like, it doesn't give a very positive image of it, and doesn't give a very respectful image of it. But that's also true with the true appearance of vulvas, of what the clitoris might look like and the different shapes that it might have. So it's a bit like, for the rest, like, we need to understand that the media are standardizing a very curated version of what sex is supposed to look like, and that reality is very different for all of us. And we just need to accept that we are writing our own script. So when it comes back to the question that the guest was asking about, how do you let yourself go? Sex is like this amazing experience that life has given us. Forget about what media say it should look like or what society should look like. When you are with a partner that you trust to have sex with and that you're enjoying their presence, like, dive into the sensation, enjoy the pleasure, don't focus on the orgasm, just enjoy the different sensations, and then that would get you to a place where you won't really care at that point about their reaction or how your body reacts, because you will be in the moment, fully in the moment. And that's what makes sex like a meditation like experience in some way. Like, it's really like, it can really anchor us in the moment.
I mean, I don't even have to do a summary speech after that statement. That was a perfect way to summarize, I think, everything that we've discussed tonight. And we are 15 minutes over time. So thank you so much to our panelists. We've managed to answer all the questions, and to our audience for asking so many questions. If there are further things that you would like answered by our panelists, feel free to DM us on social media or send an email through, and we'll attempt to get all of those questions answered for you. But thank you so much. This has been so fantastic. I really appreciate you guys taking the time for us this evening.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for
Thank
inviting us.
you.
Really fun.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.